Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session on organisational culture. I'm Gabby, and hopefully you've had a chance to read the standard sort of opening slide, and as Jo said, particularly the bit about recording the session. I wasn't planning to do introductions this morning, if that's all right with people, or we can do. Whichever, just because I know that there are in excess of 20 people booked onto the call, and I wondered if it was okay just to accept that we've got people from across the breadth of our organisation, which is brilliant. Okay. So then, this morning we've got up to 45 minutes. I was planning to share some information with you about the work of organisational development, which I might refer to as OD as we go through for brevity's sake. And in doing that, to sense check that with you actually. I'll speak, I've got some slides, I'll speak for around 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll be opening things up for discussion, and hopefully largely that'll be around what your aspirations are for the for our organisation's culture. And we'll use your thoughts and comments to inform our onward work. So I guess the obvious link between organisational development and culture specifically and quality improvement is around, well, there are lots of links, but I guess you know, we've got lots of evidence, haven't we, that tells us that staff who feel safe and valued and cared for by an organisation are those staff that in turn are enabled to consistently deliver good, compassionate care, and we all play our part in that wherever we are in the organisation. So to begin with then, I've got a couple of definitions, and I'm really not meaning to be patronising by starting with this. I'm really not. I just thought it might be helpful to us for us to have a shared understanding of what we're talking about this morning. And I accept that there are loads of different definitions, and these are just a couple that I'm offering. So organisational development then. A deliberately planned organisation-wide effort to increase the organisation's effectiveness and efficiency. It is a long-range, long-term, holistic and multifaceted approach to achieving transformational change, and it's underpinned by the belief in the ability of individuals, teams and the organisation to grow. And culture, the basic tacit assumptions about how the world is and ought to be that a group of people share, and that determines their perceptions, thoughts, feelings and their overt behaviour, and put more simply, the way things are done around here. So the story so far then, or some of it. So there's been a piece of work, an organisational diagnostic, that was carried out, quite a rapid piece of work, I guess, between March and August this year. And whilst at that point we all had lots of information telling us about the organisation and where we were at. But the main purpose of this piece of work was to gain a clearer picture of our organisational culture. It was a very collaborative piece of work done with colleagues at the University of Sheffield from the School of Management, and people involved in it were two lecturers from the School of Management, Rita Evans, the Director of Organisational Development, my colleague Simon Wheatley and myself. Both qualitative and quantitative methodology was used. So an example of the qualitative stuff was interviews, a number of interviews, one-to-one interviews that took place with members of the organisation, and quantitative methodology, lots of information that we had available to us around staff sickness, absenteeism, length of inpatient stay, stuff like that. The findings and recommendations from the diagnostic have we've used to inform our draft organisational development work plan or strategy 2020 to 2023. And I'm more than happy to share both these documents with all of you on the call if you would like that. I'll check that at the end. Yeah, they're reasonably sizable documents, but you're welcome to them. So I'm not planning on going through all the findings and recommendations from that diagnostic piece of work, but for today's purpose, given that we're focusing on culture, the following two slides are what we've learned from the diagnostic, particularly around if we pay attention to the things that I'm going to talk about, that these will have the greatest impact on shaping our culture positively, hopefully. So creating and sustaining both a psychologically and safe physical environment, clarifying purpose and enabling others to do so within their own context, reducing the bureaucratic burden that takes time away from delivering and improving quality of care, and offering a quality performance and development review PDR process and sufficient time for the supervision of practice. Role modelling, trusting and consistently demonstrating behaviours and language that accurately reflect our agreed trust values. Moving towards a dispersed leadership style with devolved decision making. Improving communication with our service users, their carers, our members and other key stakeholders, collectively co-designing and developing our services. So this is our organisational development portfolio, the areas that we both our portfolio and key themes that have come out of the diagnostic that we're working on. We don't work solely on them. We quite often, a lot of these things, we work collaboratively with other colleagues, particularly our HR colleagues. So I'll just take you through these and give you a few examples of some of the work I'm talking about. So organisational culture and design, well, all the work that we're involved in impacts culture in some way or another. And the design bit there is not necessarily talking about the structure of the organisation or how directorates are configured. It's talking more about things like how we pay attention systemically to the organisation, to the human relationships within the organisation, and things like devolving decision making within the organisation to enable those people who are closest to the point of delivering care to make relevant decisions in their service areas. So things like that. And largely Rita Evans, the Director of Organisational Development, has a lead in that area and does a lot of work with senior members of the organisation, the board and the execs. So staff engagement then, my colleague Jane Barton has a lead on this from an OD point of view, and this now includes the staff survey. Jane also leads on the values work that's currently going on, the trust values being refreshed and the whole process around that, and co-designing that process with others. Equality and diversity. From an OD point of view, Simon Wheatley leads on this, and the piece of work that you might be familiar with at the minute is around a big conversation around tackling racism within the organisation. And the next one there, health and wellbeing, Debbie Creaser takes a lead on this, and it's currently Health and Wellbeing Month and loads of activities and workshops on offer there. And the last one, leadership development and talent management, is the area that I take a lead on. So I'm probably most able to speak about. So I'm currently putting together the leadership and talent development framework for the organisation, and the overall aim of that is to set the direction and establish a means by which SHSC will attract and identify and develop and retain staff and leadership capability of the highest quality, really. And this is just a little slide just to tell you who's in the organisational development team. So there's Rita, who I've mentioned already, who's our Director of Organisational Development. We've got Georgia Goodison, who's due to start with us next week as our team administrator. There's Simon Wheatley and myself, who have the title of OD Business Partner. And then there's Jane Barton, Debbie Creaser and Emma Highfield. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful by not giving them titles. It's just that they have other bits to their roles. So Jane's the psychology leader for older adults, for example, and they're all seconded into OD. So I think that's the end of my slides, and I'd like to open it up for discussion now. And I guess the main sort of question is about what I'm interested in, all kinds of things, but particularly what your cultural aspirations are for our trust. And in order to maybe help you think about that, so when the culture feels conducive to delivering or receiving great care, what does that feel like for you? And what are the things that you value, and what are the things that we need to hold on to? So I shall open it up. Discussions, comments. Rob, I can see your hands up.
Hi, Gabby. Yeah. Oh, I'm getting some feedback there. That's going to be distracting. Two things sort of spring to mind in terms of where we'd want, where I would love to see our culture go into the direction. The first, you've already mentioned, it's in terms of delegated decision making and working that through into different levels of the organisation, as opposed to holding it at certain senior levels. I think that would be a great step forward if we're able to do more of that. And the second is around something that I haven't necessarily experienced myself, but that I've sort of anecdotally heard and sort of seen perhaps other people experiences in terms of this sort of divide, which hopefully isn't too strong a word, between sort of forward head office and HQ and all the services, all the different sites where we provide care to our service users, and this perception of, you know, sort of the ivory forward tower and everywhere else, which I found really interesting. Sort of coming to the trust, I only started in April, and something that I think that we need to tackle and change. So yeah, just my 2 pence there.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I absolutely take your point about as the people at forward, this great divide, and yeah, we all have responsibility for establishing culture within an organisation. Okay, I can see I think Mike Atta, you had your hand up next. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, I suppose my experience, I suppose if you have to put them in broad categories, is about the communication within the trust, and having to think about that, and about having respect for people's roles. And the two things overlap. I suppose if I try and give an example, we've probably all had the experience of doing our best clinically and getting on with our job and managing service users and working with them. And then an event happens and a group email starts, and there's a group email with 20 people not involved in a person's care. Nobody picks up the phone and talks to the clinicians or the staff or anybody involved in the care. But a group email starts, gets copied to all, people put in opinion, make decisions, and there's no, it's not clear who's taking responsibility for the comments that are being made or the recommendations that are being made, but the individual who's actually providing the care is left feeling either criticised or unsupported, or that people don't think you're doing your job properly, but nobody actually speaks to you. So I suppose there's the communication bit. If people would just speak to each other rather than emailing, that would be a godsend. And something within the culture that accepts that we are all trying. I think people come to work to do their best, to do a good job, and to care for patients. And if you read some of our communications and our emails, you wouldn't pick that up, that people accept that. People, almost are communicating as if they're saying you're not doing a good job, you're not doing your best, you're not going the extra mile for people, and it's quite frustrating and demoralising. And that's my cuckoo clock.
Fabulous.
I'll end on that.
Yeah, good point to end, Mike. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you said the word demoralising there. Yeah, demoralising and disrespectful, and a lot of what you're talking about did come out in the sort of one-to-one interviews within the diagnostic. And I think you're talking about several things. So one, the way in which we communicate. And I think on one of the slides I'd put something like to address the bureaucratic processes that take away from delivering and improving care, and that sort of falls within that category, the way that we email about really important things actually, and then the decision making. And why it needs to be devolved decision making, because quite often in clinical situations you'll end up with people who actually are quite far removed from the situation taking decisions. So yeah, I absolutely recognise those points. Okay, Myra, you had your hand up next. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I was dealing with the microphone. I'm sorry. Yes, one thing I'd like to put forward, I'm speaking from a service user point of view at the moment, and if I get to be a culture champion, I'd like to bring into the trust a much wider involvement of service users in decisions that are made, because I think on the receiving end of the care, I think we've got valid things to actually feed in to give a wider view of what's happening, a more rounded view, and possibly that will make the trust even more relevant to what's going on. The staff views are great, but I think we need also the other side of the situation, and so I would champion that side of things to make the trust, I feel, more relevant.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Myra. It's really helpful to hear you say that. And I guess from an organisational development point, we're really trying to co-create things
with service users.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the organisational work plan strategy, I know we've got a bespoke session coming up shortly that I've been talking to Robin Fletcher about, specifically with service users.
When will that be?
Carers. I don't know yet. Myra will let you know. I know Robin's on the call. It will be within the next month or so, I think. Yeah. But part of doing stuff like this, from my point of view, is brilliant because it helps me make connections with other people who I can then include things as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll switch myself off. Thank you.
Thanks, Myra. Joe, you have your hand up. Joe Evans.
Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, I am up next. I've just noticed Robin's put her hand up, and I don't know if she wanted to come in to respond to that question.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, I was just going to say, Myra, that we're hoping to do it on the 11th of November, but we're just in the middle of planning kind of how that looks, because we want to make sure that we're going to get the most out of the session, so to plan the session, and also how best to communicate it to service users and carers. So if you have any ideas on that, then that'd be brilliant, but we will be putting a plan together, and hopefully you'll get the communications about that.
Thanks, Robin.
Thank you very much. And I could possibly, outside of this meeting, make some suggestions as to how you could get other people included in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Myra, can you see the comments section on here?
Well, yes, I can see comments, yes.
I'll pop an email address in and then you can send anything over to that. Would that be all right?
That's lovely.
And
Thank
like
you very much.
anyone else. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Brilliant. Jo,
Thanks, Gabby. Sorry, I noticed when Robin's hand went up, so I thought it might be in response. So, yeah, from my perspective, and just really sort of following on from Mike and Myra, there's probably lots of things, but there's a couple of things that I've written down. I think one for me is a culture of kind of following on from what Myra was saying, is about the service user, carer, the co-production, that kind of thing. But it's to try and move away a little bit, I think, from this split. In terms of, we have our service users, we have our carers, and we have our staff. And people who know me will have heard this from me before, because I do feel quite strongly about it. And when I was working in the physical health side of things in the teaching hospitals, everybody there probably has used all of those services as well. And I'm sure there's lots and lots of staff who have used the services. And I think there's a danger of kind of thinking, if we've not got somebody who only comes as that we're not hearing the voice. And I think for me, it's a culture of recognising it. Actually, we all work together, same as some of the service users and carers might be previously staff employees and can bring that as well. So I think for me, I'd really like to see a culture of a really collaborative approach, rather than the ticket, how many of these have we got and how many of these have we got, who wants to say where they're from. So for me, that's one bit, I think, that really kind of, everybody's got a different role and we all work together. And the other bit, I guess, picks up on what Mike was saying a little bit, I think, around, and from my perspective and running this week, is about people feeling enabled and encouraged to get involved, to put time aside, to improve, feeling valued, which I guess kind of picks up on what Mike was saying, that actually it's okay to try and improve things, and if it doesn't quite work out, how can we learn from that and become a real learning culture, rather than it being a culture of Mike was just expressing there, kind of people maybe feeling they can't say what they want to say comes around. So I think to try and really develop this openness and supportive, encouraging and enabling culture for me, I'd like to see 70 people on this call or more, that people feel that they can come. So I'll mute myself now too. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you. I'm going to move on because I can see all the hands up. Rodri, do you want to speak?
Hi, yes, thanks, Gabby. It's really sort of following on from, I think, Mike's point, and I think this is. So I think what it seems like, anyway, from my perspective, is that there feels like there's been a culture of blame, I think, over time, and that when in response to difficult things happening, there's a search for kind of why did it go wrong and where did it go wrong, and I think that's right, but it's also a sense that people feel under in very difficult circumstances under threat from that, and I think we've got to be able to move much more towards a sort of an understanding about and a non-blame culture where we try to understand how things, where things go, badly or wrong, but that we don't seek to chastisement. We really, as I think Jo was saying, make it a learning culture, without the sort of judgmental part of that. I mean, clearly there are things that happen in the world that are bad and that are that people can be blamed for. But I think we're too ready. We're too ready to do that. And I think we have to make it much more of a learning rather than judgmental.
Okay. Thanks, Rodri. And yeah, that's a really important point, isn't it? About and I think in one of the slides I'd made a very brief reference to promoting, developing a psychologically safe culture where people do feel safe to speak up and share their ideas and their mistakes. And we know that psychologically unsafe organisations inhibit learning. Yeah. Thank you. Pete Sanford.
Yeah, just to pull those last two points together, really. That Joe's point first about kind of intersectionality, that we hold together different identities. Myself, I've got lived experience of recovery from mental health problems. I work in the CERT team. I'm also got experience of working in organisational development, equality and diversity. But because of COVID, I'm mainly working from home, supporting my wife, who was in the shielding category, and my daughter, who's got very challenging behaviour. I'm in a fortunate place where my teams are able to support me to work from home, and I'm able to kind of it's juggling, but kind of holding those different identities together all at the same time. And I'm in a kind of supportive network for that to be the case, but I hear through kind of listening into action conversations that not everybody feels equally well supported through these COVID times. So I hear from some people that being asked to take out annual leave in order to provide carer responsibilities for members of the family, and then having no annual leave left for the year just as we're coming into this kind of COVID emergency that's ahead of us, having just kind of used the annual leave to provide care for a family member, and how kind of anxiety provoking that is for the way forward. And for me, one of the options that I think I've learned that we have as a way out of this situation, and where the trust is beginning, I think, to work well, is through the provision of the kind of equalities networks. So already there's the BAME Build, Modify, Expand network in place. We're working with a year into the lived experience staff network group. We've been setting up the disability staff network group that mainly coincides with the group of SHIP people who are shielding, and now that's moved on to a group for people who are more vulnerable in whatever terms to COVID. And those conversations, because they are very much about conversations rather than kind of campaigning networks or agenda networks, those conversations are really important, I think, for helping us to engage with each other and support each other who identify with those identities, but also because of OOD and human resources input into those conversations that's been really helpful. They've become a very effective place of conversing with the organisation in order to be able for people to feel safe to flag up where those those kind of identities that we hold all the time with us, where they kind of come into conflict with that kind of organisational expectations, and make space for it to be, again, as you said, psychologically safe, for us to name those things and for us to work towards a solution. So I think kind of we're at a place where we're beginning to change the culture, and I think COVID's kind of perhaps forced that upon us, that was already needing to happen for a long time, of us actually just being able to be open about who we are, what our experiences are, to show to ourselves the compassion that we would like to show to our service users, and that we're holding those together. And if we're able to support each other and be in a team which can support us, then that makes it a safer place, and we're going to deliver a more compassionate service.
Yeah, thank you, Pete. And yeah, that all sounds really positive and hopeful. And I think just picking up on one of the things you referenced there, I think, was around sort of the consistent and fair application of process. such as annual leave, carers leave, stuff like that. So yeah, the problem not necessarily with those processes or policies, but it's in the application of them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Robin, have you got your hand up?
Yeah. Yeah, Peter, actually, I completely agree with. So I started with the trust working with Shepherd Flourish as well during all of this, I think in June. I'm talking about the lockdown and COVID. And I've noticed a lot of themes coming up that people are very passionate about around changing the culture, particularly making it more of a learning culture, admitting mistakes, and kind of that real feeling of we're all human and we don't need to kind of hide any mistakes that we've got, if that kind of makes sense. But I think there were some things we were talking about earlier that I wanted to pick up on around the culture and feedback we have had from service users, particularly to do with kind of engagement with all of the changes that are happening. So at the moment, obviously, we've got loads of different strategies being built. We've got CQC and all the back to good different work streams, and everything's very fast paced. And I think there's within the culture, because it's fast paced and we're wanting to fix things, maybe sometimes we don't have enough time to do that learning process from service users and really involving them in all aspects of it. And that includes stuff like feeding back to people who have been involved in these changes, what's happening. And I think because there isn't a consistency, or there's not a particular process in how we do that across the trust, different teams tend to have different ways of doing that, so it's hard to keep track on whether we've got that good learning culture and whether we're really involving people.
Okay, thank you. It's just really important, isn't it? And we've still got such a way to go with this, and particularly that bit about feeding back. You're right. You know, sometimes we feel like we might have got better at involving others earlier on in a process, but then we let ourselves down by not continuing that communication. Okay, thank you. Jo Evans.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I was just picking up really on a point that Pete was saying, and it just made me reflect kind of on the mornings so far this week. And I think you mentioned, Pete, something around kind of looking after ourselves and feeling that it's okay to look after ourselves, etc. And obviously this week, hopefully people have seen that we're offering just 10 minutes every morning for people to just take a little bit of time for themselves. And we're offering, you can do that through a mindfulness session, you can do that through a poetry session, you can do that through what we call desk yoga. You know, you don't need to get dressed up especially for it. But what I've noticed is there was loads and loads of interest in it, in terms of registrations, and obviously it's there, it's an open forum, come if you want to, don't if you don't, absolutely. But what's interesting is the numbers attending those are not matching, such as the ones attending these sessions. And I wonder if it's something about, again, going back to people feeling that that's okay, that actually, oh, I ought to come to this because I need to be hearing it's to do with work. Whereas perhaps that 10 minutes in the morning, people, I wonder if they feel that it's okay to do that. And actually, is it seen as a bit of a luxury? And actually, that's not kind of important. Improving their own personal well-being isn't as important. And just hearing Pete, the bit that Pete was saying, I'm kind of reflecting on that, thinking, is that what's happening? We don't, you know, I don't know. We can do some evaluation after, but I think it's really interesting in terms of there's clearly some enthusiasm for wanting to do it, and are people just feeling that actually that's not okay? Yeah, it was more of a reflection really than a question there. It was just an opportunity to just reflect on things. So. And they are running for the rest of the week. If that's made people think and they want to come, then do. But it was, yeah, I think it is a good point about how we, and I'm guilty of this as well. So I'm speaking from, you know, I'm guilty of it totally in terms of you know, you people wanting to help other people all the time, but actually, you know, how do we look after ourselves?
Yeah, thanks, Jo. Yeah, part reflection, part plug, I notice.
Absolutely, always whilst we can.
Yeah, but yeah, something I think we're repeatedly defeated by looking after ourselves. Okay, thank you. Rob, you have your hand up.
Hi, yeah, just to say, just completely agree with what Joe's saying about sort of looking after ourselves, and I think that extends to obviously sort of self-care, but also personal development. So when I first started the trust in April of this year, obviously I didn't have a sort of a full plate of work to do. And I sort of took opportunities to have a look at where we might be able to improve certain processes, or what sort of other systems we might use to do some things more efficiently or more effectively. And I also looked at how I could, you know, potentially do some training or some other things I could do to develop myself. And I don't. That's definitely all gone to the bottom of the sort of the to-do list now. Now that I've definitely got a full plate of work, and in fact probably over capacity. So pushing back on extra things I'm getting. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I definitely do that myself. I will always sort of think, oh, I should really, you know, try and do X, Y, and Z. But for my own personal development or for looking after myself, but it very rarely happens.
Yeah, I think probably a number of us on the call can identify with that, Rob. And and whilst, you know, a lot of this is our own personal responsibility, it's also nice sometimes to have sort of leadership or management that promotes that in us as well.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's about sort of, you know, even if you're really, really, really busy, it's about saying, you know, everyone, I don't know, just for sake of argument, between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on a Friday or whatever, that's your own time to do your own personal development. You know, as your manager could say to you, let me know what have you done in those 2 hours every week? How have you moved things forward that you personally want? I don't know, just, you know, just throwing ideas about. But could be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Okay, we've got 2 more people, Jane and then Gurka. So Jane, want to go?
Yeah, couple of points. Really picking up on that, really, what Joe's saying about and Rob there. And I suppose I'm just thinking about some of the conversations we've been having recently, actually with you as well, you know, Gabby, around how we influence and change the trust narrative, really. And, you know, the narratives that get talked about all the time in the trust, and the predominance of the narrative being around governance, really, governance and processes, as opposed to people and what we bring and well-being. And I know, you know, you and I have, with others, have been having more conversations about this and thinking about different models, really, for culture change. So I suppose it's just it's probably not surprising that people are not overtly necessarily looking after their own well-being in signing up to some of the events, when, you know, the narrative within the trust hasn't really supported that in an active way before. So I was just commenting on that, really.
Yeah.
And then also, just while I'm on, rather than coming back on again in a minute with my hand up, Gabby, just really to highlight, picking up on what you've mentioned about the values refresh. So the fact that we have been asked to refresh the trust values, and I guess everything that people are saying here really does reflect on a value or a behaviour or an expectation. So we're going to be doing that work hopefully over November, December. So yeah, we will be asking for people to be involved, to comment, to contribute, to help us do that, and hopefully we can shape that in a way that's meaningful. Thanks. That was it.
Okay. Thank you, Jane. Thanks. Gurka, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Gabby. Yes. Yeah, just kind of listening and reflecting on the whole, you know, kind of staff well-being and that balance between obviously all of us kind of, you know, working hard at looking at after ourselves, but also that kind of building it in. So like Joe was saying, you know, kind of this week, the reflection of people attending or not coming to the well-being sessions. But also that sense of, I'm struck how, so the trust, you know, kind of does the improvement methodology is the microsystem approach. And one thing there, which I really, really love, is the check-in, which is that when we come together as a group, which is, you know, such an opportunity actually for being together as humans, as well as, like Jane, you're saying, looking at governance as processes and things. But that opportunity just to really make space for checking in with each other, you know, where we are, how we are doing, and how so often that can get dropped off or isn't done, you know, because of there seems to be, you know, time, you know, is short to address everything. But actually what does strike me, if we stop and make the time for that, we are more productive. And so the value of that really is, in my eyes, massive. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gurka. And yeah, I don't know, from what I'm hearing, is that possibly the biggest cultural shift in our thinking that we need to make? One of many. Okay, Rodri, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, it was just to follow up on what Gurka was saying. But so I think, I mean, there is that sort of checking in, but I think also that we need, this is where sort of really improved supervisory, you know, quality supervisory practice is going to be important as well, because that, you know, that's an area where you can really, you know, sort of clinically and, you know, and personally, you know, support people. You know, because that's, you know, part, you know, one of the key functions of supervision is to be able, you know, to have that sort of supportive function. And I think, you know, so I think, you know, and I think often, well, my view from, you know, over time is that actually supervision has just been used as a sort of task-based place, rather than actually, you know, it's other sort of bits with the sort of educative function and the support function. So I think we need, you know, definitely improvements in our supervisory practice will also, I think, help.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Rodri. Yeah, that's a good point. And I know that there's lots of work currently going on around supervision. I know Rob's very involved with that. And yeah, the restorative element of supervision, yeah, seems to have gone astray somewhere. Okay, I'm very conscious of time. We've got 2 minutes left, but Pete, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, just very briefly, I've included in the chat links to the Wellbeing Festival. The program's going to be coming out for people to watch for that, and that's going to be a whole month long of events and things. So watch out for the program on that one, but also around kind of how we kind of creating a culture of kind of conversation and support for individuals. I've been had the privilege of working with Gurka quite a bit over the last few months, and Mike and Simon, Agnes and Adam, to put together the Walking Alongside Lived Experience Mentoring project, which is as an addition to the coaching offer within the trust, just with that kind of sense of accompaniment for people, for us to be able to have space to kind of define our journey, to have somebody walk alongside us for a period of time, and to come back much more to that kind of human level. It's not there to kind of compensate for gaps in supervision, where kind of the previous commenters have kind of really identified where there can be gaps in supervision, but kind of adding into the human support side. Maybe someone might not need to see workplace well-being for a particular need, but might just have a sense of somebody else to chat with, to kind of get a sense of perspective, to make a journey alongside. So we're trying to develop that side of the offer within the trust as well.
Okay, thank you, Pete. That's really helpful. Okay, and it feels like a nice place to end, probably. It's 12:30. So yeah, can I just say, yeah, thank you all so much for, yeah, to speaking and contributing. Yeah, sort of really interesting stuff, and I assure you all your sort of comments and thoughts and stuff will inform our onward approach. Jo, would you like to say anything?
I'm just come back on to say thank you to you, Gabby. I've been checking through the comments. I don't think there's been anything that hasn't been picked up verbally as well. So I think we've covered a few sharing of links and sharing, but lots of thank yous seem to be coming in there as well, Gabby. So thanks ever so much for this session. And I would imagine that people can contact you, Gabby, if they want to about anything.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said earlier, yeah, I'm happy to share documents with you, but yeah, rather than, because they're big documents, and rather than just sending them en masse, if you just drop me a quick email and I will get them to you. Yeah, so, and I hope you've got something lovely for your lunch.
Thanks ever so much.
Right, thanks. See you all soon. Bye.
Thank you. See you.